We are still having a few more people joining, and I know we've got quite a lot more that have registered as well, so they may be late from their other meetings. Or so I think, in interest of everyone's time, we'll kick off now. So good morning, everyone. Yeah, thanks for joining us today. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Alex Oliver. I'm the partnerships lead for the REWIRE Innovation and Knowledge Centre. And I'm here just to sort of set the scene, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Katie to actually go on with the webinar presentation for the open call today. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping. So we are recording the session. It will be available after the webinar as well on our YouTube page and our website. Yeah, just to highlight that. There will be opportunities to ask questions. So if you want to do that, please use the chat or Q&A functions within Teams, and we'll come to those at the end. We've already had a few come in previously, so we'll also touch upon those. And I think that's really it from me for now. So yeah, just now to hand over to Katie to introduce herself and to outline why it is that you are all here today. So take it away, Katie.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alex. Hopefully you can all see my slides now.
Yep, all good.
Good, brilliant. So I'm Katie Hoare and I'm Innovation Director at REWIRE. I'm going to start off with just a brief intro to REWIRE. So we are an £11 million IKC funded by UKRI, and we're working on the next generation of power semiconductors. You all know what power semiconductors are, but I think it's important to remember why they are so vital to us and why we are working on them. And they are going to become even more essential with the electrification, which is going to come with net zero. 5-minute car charging is now here, but as car charging gets faster and more efficient, the adoption is going to be easier. Charging your car feels like filling it up with petrol, that's another hurdle we've got over for the adoption of electric cars. The national grid is going to have to become more robust. Electricity is increasingly becoming from renewable sources, which are less predictable and more widespread, and therefore we need these power semiconductor devices which can cope with the unexpected changes and can be robust enough to make sure our national grid is reliable. They'll also be needed for planet-friendly AI. If you lose a lot of the energy in your data center in converting between different voltages or transferring through power semiconductors, well, it's not there to power your compute chips, and therefore you're increasing the energy load needed for your data center. So having more efficient power semiconductor chips means you need less energy and the AI has less of an impact. And also they allow us to do all the exciting science that we like talking about, such as space exploration or fusion energy with its promise of cheap, very clean energy. And silicon can no longer meet the requirements we're asking from these devices. We need them to be able to work at high voltages, at higher temperatures, and at higher switching speeds, while still being very small, being highly reliable and having long lifetimes. And therefore we're looking towards these new compound type materials within REWIRE. Materials such as silicon carbide and gallium nitride, they're already out there in our electric cars, in our laptop and phone chargers. But there's still a lot to be done to understand about how they work, how they fail when they don't work, how to improve them, improve reliability and efficiency, and to move them towards even higher voltage applications. And we're looking at the future materials, those that will be out in our devices in the short to medium term, such as gallium oxide, aluminium nitride, and even longer term devices made out of diamond. So REWIRE is really driving innovation in this field. We bring together industry and academia to tackle the problems, co-developing projects with industry, so our academic research is very relevant. We're developing UK-based capabilities, and we're ensuring the UK can have impact across the global semiconductor supply chain. We're a consortium of 3 different universities, so that's Bristol, Warwick and Cambridge, and we have over 30 industry partners, both in the UK and abroad, and from all across the supply chain, and there are just some examples in here. within REWIRE, we go all the way from growing epi layers on wafers. We make devices in our clean rooms. Currently, we mainly do the packaging with our external partners, and then we put these devices into modules to see how they really behave. And at all of these stages, we have a large range of equipment for testing and understanding how the materials and devices work, and how to improve them for the next iteration. And to give you an idea of what we're working on, these are just 4 projects we have currently running. So at Bristol, we're working on gallium oxide, and we have a world-leading gallium oxide device with a breakdown voltage of 4 kilovolts, which we believe is the highest yet reported. And what I find really exciting is we have so many ideas about how to further improve these devices and to move them towards even higher breakdown voltages and greater reliability. At Warwick, we're improving the breakdown voltage and the reliability of silicon carbide devices, particularly by improving the quality of the dielectrics they contain and the looking at and manipulating the interfaces between those dielectrics and the active material. And at Cambridge, we're working on understanding failure mechanisms for gallium nitride devices under high radiation conditions. These devices can then, and then when we understand how they fail, we can then improve the devices and create reliable devices for sectors such as space, aerospace, or in the maintenance of the next generation of nuclear reactors. And slightly more unusually for a science and engineering project, we're working very closely with the University of Bristol Business School, who are doing an in-depth analysis of the supply chains for compound semiconductors, and they're developing tools which businesses can use to monitor and mitigate their risk exposures. There are many ways that industry and other academics can interact and get involved with REWIRE. So firstly, getting involved with our industry-led projects and use cases, particularly industry members helping to guide the direction of these projects, and ensuring that they are picked to create real benefits for the UK. For industry, we have directly funded PhD and postdoc projects. We'd love you to fund PhDs, but we do sometimes understand that it can take a little while to get results from a PhD project. A new PhD student can take quite a while to find their feet and understand the project, and then it can take even longer for you to get results. So we have REWIRE postdocs who are already in our labs. They're familiar with the full range of facilities and techniques that we have, and they can be working on your projects very quickly. It can be more expensive to upfront to have a postdoc-led project, but because those projects tend to be much shorter, it can actually cost less overall. We also have a full list of our facilities on our website across the 3 universities, how to get access to them, and advice, and how to get access to advice on the best way to do the work that you want to do. We're also going to be launching this year prototype and research fabrication processes for gallium nitride and silicon carbide devices. So this is essentially a test bed for if you have an idea, say an improved dielectric or a slightly different infrastructure architecture, you can try those out in our lab. If you don't have the facilities to do it in your own company or your own research facility, or perhaps you're not going to be allowed to mess around with an already set up production line by your facilities manager. And so you can come to us, do those first few experiments, produce the first, say, half a dozen devices, do some iterations with us until you're ready to move on to the larger scale up facilities. And finally, what you're all here to hear about, our open call. So the first round of the open call projects are about halfway through, and they're really showing us exactly what the open call is about. Real industry partnerships, doing cutting edge science, making rapid and targeted progress towards the next generation of power devices. So the projects that we're currently running include Sora Aviation, who are developing zero-emission, low-noise aircraft. And their project, Hyper, is looking particularly at developing lightweight, high power density, high efficiency silicon carbide inverters for electric aircraft propulsion. And there really aren't the inverters currently on the market, which are at these very high power densities that they need, while still being incredibly reliable and fairly light. And so they're using existing silicon carbide devices to develop this new inverter. Kawasa Semi are a company that are producing intuitive, very accessible TCAD simulation models specifically designed for wide bandgap technologies and materials. And their project, Vespa, is working with the University of Warwick to validate and iteratively improve their models using real-world experimental data produced at the University of Warwick. Classic is a silicon carbide fab, and they are working on PDKs for 2.5 kilovolt high voltage silicon carbide MOSFETs with particular applications in renewable energy, such as HVDC transmission. And they are working with Warwick to design the PDK and the materials needed for these devices. And so with the REWIRE Open Call, we want to fund these groundbreaking research projects and proof of concept research that advance the understanding of wide bandgap and ultra wide bandgap semiconductor devices and packaging for power applications. So projects can be anything from new materials and new device concepts, packaging ideas, all using wide bandgap and ultra wide bandgap devices for power applications, all the way through to seeing how those devices behave within modules. The key here is innovative projects which try something new and enable you to accelerate work that wouldn't happen otherwise. So we're funding projects up to £50,000 in length for 3 to 6 months. Sorry, £50,000 in funding of a length of 3 to 6 months. We have a deadline for finishing of 12 months. This is mainly because I don't want to be dealing with a load of extension requests for things that go slightly over 6 months. So target your project to that 3 to 6 month length. Timelines. Applications opened last week and the deadline is the 5th of March at 11 p.m. I'm assured by the 5th of March there will be daffodils and sunlight and things will feel a bit more cheerful. And then the awards will be announced on the 30th of April, with projects starting within 3 months of the receipt of the award letter, which will be sent out fairly promptly after the announcement. Have a look on our website. The award letter is there for you to check that that's something that you're happy to sign up to. There's some slight changes between round 2 compared to round 1. So the projects in round 2, which are solely focused on module optimization, are not eligible. And this is because REWIRE is primarily focused on materials, device development, packaging, and how those devices behave in a module, rather than going a step further and optimizing that module specifically. In round 2, we also want to make the process even more accessible, especially for academics who are often working on lower TRL projects where it's a bit harder to demonstrate immediate industry impact. And we want to be able to recognize excellence both in the industrial innovation and early stage research. And so industry and academic projects will be assessed separately. Overall, we'll be funding 3 projects in total, with at least 1 being academic-led and 1 being industry-led. Who can apply? Well, anyone who's working on wide bandgap and ultra wide bandgap for power applications. And this includes the usual industry, academics, charities, government organisations, catapults, etc. Non-UK organisations can apply, but there must be clear benefit of your project to the UK. And we'd really encourage you to get in touch with us first to be able to discuss your project and discuss if you're eligible. Current REWIRE partners, i.e. academics at Bristol and Warwick and Cambridge who are currently receiving funding from the REWIRE use case budget, can't receive funding as part of a project, but they can be non-funded partners in the project. And on the next slide, I'll give you details of the percentage of funding levels for each of these different organisations. As impact and collaboration is a really large part of why we run this open call, it is an advantage to have further funding or in-kind support from industry, especially for an academic project. Formal letters of support aren't required, but please make sure you have a firm commitment before you submit, and in your application clearly demonstrate the industry support for your project. Funding. All of this is on our website in the core guidelines, so don't worry about, making sure you take it all in now. With funding, directly incurred and directly allocated costs can be claimed up to a maximum of £50,000. We encourage you to keep the DA costs to a minimum, and equipment costs of greater than £10,000 are ineligible. Funding for business sizes funding for business depends on the size. So we generally follow the usual UKRI percentages and business size definitions. So have a look on the UKRI website if you're not sure which category you fall into. Businesses can claim 20% overheads. For universities, they can claim the standard 80% FEC, and RTOs, government organisations, charities can claim 100% FEC. And onto the application. So again, all details of this are available on our website, so have a look there. I won't go into too much detail. The application is broadly 2 to 3 pages with a cover letter. The 2 to 3 pages is a guideline. If you need to add an appendix for images or to put your risk register in, that's fine. We just want to keep it to a size where you can get across what you need to do without having to write reams of paperwork, and then we have to read reams of paperwork. Just to highlight a few things to bear in mind when writing your application, please think about the aims of the call when you're writing about your vision and approach. And when you're writing about the alignment, just keep in mind REWIRE's goals, which we have up here, and also how it's going to benefit the semiconductor industry in the UK. We also have a project plan. So there is a template for a Gantt chart on the website, but go ahead, feel free to use whatever you find easiest and most, whatever you usually use, essentially. There's a costings Excel file. That should be pretty straightforward. I don't think we had any issues with it in the first round, but if you have any questions, do get in touch with us. And there is an EDI form, which is completely separate from your application, won't be looked at until, well, after all the applications have been assessed, and is anonymous anyway, but it's just to ensure we're reaching everybody we want to with the open call. The reporting as we go through is as slight touch as possible. So 3 monthly updates, so basically an update approximately in the middle and then one at the end, and a final report at the end, all again about 2 to 3 pages. And we ask for brief spending reports. So again, we can report back to APSSE and assure them we're spending their money in a responsible way. If you do decide not to apply, but still would like to be involved, we are after reviewers for the applications. So get in touch with me if you're interested in that. So thank you very much. I'm more than happy to answer questions. This is a QR code with a link to our website, or just Google REWIRE Semiconductors. And there is a flexible funding mailbox if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Katie. So yeah, plenty of time for questions. If anybody has them, feel free to pop them into the chat or the Q&A as you see fit. We have already had a few come in anyway, so we can kick off with those. Sorry, they came in before the webinar, so we can kick off with those. So can proposals include both materials and device level work within them?
Yeah, definitely. Again, anything in that range from materials right through to working out how these devices behave when you put them in a real world situation. Do bear in mind they're fairly short projects, so don't overextend yourself with what you plan to do. But if that involves, say, developing a material or a new epi stack, like in the classic project, and then going through and designing devices with that, that would be a feasible project to do.
Great. And then what TRL range is expected for proposed projects?
The projects can be any TRL level. So because we're looking at fundamental research, there will be low TRL projects, but given we're after those sort of proof of concept type projects, and we would like some short to medium term impact, we would expect most projects to be in the range of about 3 to 6.
Great. Another one that we had come in was, what counts as a clear demonstration of industry requirement?
Ideally, we'd like commitments of cash or in-kind support from industry for the project, because this demonstrates that there is real commitment from industry, real interest in the project, if they're prepared to put their money or time behind it. But similar sort of expressions of interest are also really good things to add to the project. As I said, you don't need specific letters of support, so no need to go around gathering those. Just make sure you have clear commitments and you clearly detail that in your proposal so we know what you've been thinking. We know the people you've talked to and got support from.
Cool, that's nice and clear. Um, what opportunities are there for follow-on funding after, if there were to, if a project was to be successful within this round, what opportunities are there for follow-on funding as a result of the outcomes and impact that they deliver?
Yeah, so you're welcome to apply to the next rounds of the Rewire open call. The details of those calls may change slightly, I mean, as they have now between the first and second round of the calls, but we would again welcome applications to do further work if that's appropriate. I'd also encourage you as part of your application to think about what you do for further funding. And, is this an opportunity to start a project, to gather some information, to do a proof of concept, then go on and get a larger funding from somewhere else? And that's definitely something we'd encourage you and we'd be happy to kind of help you with after the initial project.
Sure, thanks. We've had one just come in from Harsh. So it's very difficult to get involved with UK organisations, although you have a lot of research experience in a similar field. Do you really provide sponsorship for a postdoc position? I'm not sure fully.
Um,
I, yeah, sorry, Katie.
so, I mean, I can talk kind of in slightly more in general. So the open call doesn't provide sponsorship for postdoc positions specifically. We do have postdoc positions open through REWIRE. The timeline might be a little bit short, but I think there's some closing this week or early next week. So please do go have a on our website and have a look at that. So I think there are 3 based in Bristol, and there might be a couple more coming up in Warwick and Cambridge soon. So keep an eye on that and sign up to our newsletter.
Great. So we just had one in. So thanks for the brief talk. Is there a specific application portal, or is the submission handled in a different way?
So all the information about that is on our website, but it's an email with the appropriate attachments sent to that flexible funding inbox.
Great. Yeah, I've put a link into the chat for those who are attending to that takes you directly to the open call page. So yeah, everything is on there. But if there are things that are still unclear, feel free to get in touch with us at the REWIRE flexible funding mailbox or via anyone within the REWIRE ops team. A couple of more that we've already had come in previously. So will feedback be provided to unsuccessful applicants?
I would like to be able to provide feedback as far as I can, but it does depend a little bit on how many applications we get and the time availability to be able to do that. I do think if you've put the effort in to put in an application, it's fair that I spend a bit of time going through and giving people feedback, but I'm not going to be able to promise that for everybody.
Sure. A couple final ones that we've got that are a bit more sort of nuanced. So, how can applicants access REWIRE facilities for fabrication and testing as part of the open call?
I think this would have to be done on a case-by-case basis. So research groups that are already involved in REWIRE can't receive funding through this call. So if it's their specific equipment, we might have to look at that more closely. But a lot of the REWIRE facilities are separate entities on their own. For example, the clean rooms you'd access through the usual method of accessing that clean room. There are more details about all the facilities that REWIRE have on the website.
Great. And then one final one, which I think is quite important to potentially to go through in a bit more detail again, because it's a change from the last time that we ran this. So how will academic-led and industry-led projects be assessed? Will they be assessed against each other? And how, if not, how will they sort of be assessed differently?
So industry and academic led projects will be assessed separately. And then there will be, just because they won't have different criteria, but what we did find last time was, because academic projects tend to be lower TRL, having that immediate industry impact isn't so easy to demonstrate, and therefore that category in the assessment was always lower, and it didn't seem a fair way to assess the projects. So they will be assessed separately. One from each, one industry, one academic, will be funded, and then the third one will depend on the strength of both the industry and academic projects that we've received.
Great. Yeah, and just to clarify to everyone, the assessment criteria are clearly listed in the call documentation and call guidances on the REWIRE website. So I would have a look at that. But again, if you've got any questions about that, feel free to get in touch with us. We've not had any more
I think
questions.
there's one more question in the Q&A.
Oh, I may have missed that. Sorry, I will come to that now. Apologies, I was just looking at the chat. So Amal has said, can a project be based on a proof of concept demonstrating how, for example, silicon carbide can be used for a microsystem design that has already been validated on a silicon-based platform?
Yeah, that sounds like it would be within scope. Sounds like an interesting project. Amal, if you have any more questions, do drop us an email, and we can have a little bit of a closer look about whether it would be eligible.
Great. Thanks for highlighting that one to me.
Mhm.
Yeah. I don't think we've got any more that have come in. So I'll give everyone like a minute or so more in case they did want to ask any questions. One thing I did want to highlight that is slightly separate from this, but also related to REWIRE, is that we've currently got an expression of interest open for a REWIRE workshop that is taking place in Japan for next generation wide bandgap electronics. Really about bringing together the UK and Japanese ecosystems together, and how we can develop those sort of collaborations for these sort of more so these wide bandgap technologies. So things looking at gallium oxide, aluminium nitride for next generation technologies. I will pop a link to the EOI in the chat if anyone is interested. Just to let you know that this does close tomorrow at 4 p.m. So if you are interested, you have to be quick. But yeah, feel free to get in touch with us as well. If you have any questions about that, we looking to support UK attendees with their sort of travel and accommodations coming out to that in March. So yeah, hopefully, if that's of interest to you, feel free to submit an EOI for that. So yeah, not had any more questions in the chat, not had any more questions in the Q&A. So I think at that point we will close the webinar there. Yeah, just a massive thank you to everyone who's attended. And as I said, if you've got any questions up until the submission deadline of early March, please feel free to get in touch with anyone of the REWIRE team. And yeah, good luck with your applications.
Brilliant.
Thanks,
Thank you very
everyone.
much. Bye.